Is out of his deal with Justin Trudeau, an agreement that's seen the NDP prop up the Liberals for 2.5 years in exchange for a list of promises, most of which have already been realized to one degree or another. A national dental care program, for example, the introduction of a Pharmacare Act, the Canada Early Learning and Child Care Act, anti-scab legislation, 10 days of paid sick leave for federally regulated workers. You can see it all on the screen ahead of you. A homebuyer's Bill of Rights, Housing Accelerator Fund, Sustainable Jobs Act. That was all part of the original deal. There are still a few outstanding things, a Safe Long-Term Care Act, initiatives on electoral reform. Pharmacare is just out in a smaller iteration than full, wide-scale Pharmacare, which the NDP has advocated for. So what did exactly prompt Jagmeet Singh to drop this deal when he did today? We've got a special panel convened to talk about that. Former NDP leader Tom Mulcair is with us, as his former interim Conservative leader and current deputy chairwoman at TD Securities, Rana Ambrose, and former communications director to Prime Minister Paul Martin. Scott Reid is here. Hi, everybody. Thanks for getting together on this big day. Tom, I'm going to start with you. We've had this conversation before on air where you have talked about this move being something that the NDP at some point necessarily had to do. But did you think they'd do it now? And do you think it's going to work for them?
No, I really did not think that they would do it now. I was caught off guard like a lot of people were. Mr. Singh's admonition that all this is about Mr. Trudeau caving to corporate greed, I did my best to look over what happened during the summer, because when they left in June, there wasn't any of that. And I couldn't find anything specific, actually. What I did find was an indication that there was a serious drop in the polls for the NDP. And I also know that in Elmwood-Transcona, the by-election that's now taking place in Manitoba, a long-time NDP seat, the Blakey family, Bill first and now Daniel, who stepped down, looks like they're in trouble there. That's what I'm getting from people on the ground. There's another one in Montreal where the NDP has a chance. But on the doorstep, they've been hearing, well, why do you keep voting for Trudeau? And I think it has everything to do with that. It's a bit of a desperation move, frankly. It's a Hail Mary pass for Singh. Because on the one hand, he said it's about corporate greed by the Liberals. But if you go into the actual text of what he put out, as you just correctly said, he's leaving the door open to continuing to support the Liberals. And I think that it's going to be very difficult after using that harsh terminology for him to find a way to explain a vote in favor of the Liberals if and when, because there will be, a confidence motion in the House. The Conservatives are not going to wait. They'll put a very simple, pared-down confidence motion before the House. We'll see what Singh does with it. I don't think it's long-term. I can't understand this strategy. It was ill-prepared. The only thing we got was a press conference yesterday where Singh was on a picket line saying Trudeau would never show up on a picket line. That was their only preparation for this thing, to try to give the casus belli, the reason for starting this. I'm not sure long-term this is going to play out well for the NDP, frankly.
Rana, how difficult of a balancing act do you anticipate it will be for Jagmeet Singh and the NDP to do what Tom just described? Basically, on the one hand today, call out the Liberals for being, and I'm quoting what he said, weak and selfish, and at the same time, on matters of confidence, decide ultimately to support the government. Like, how do you sell that to Canadians? Oh, I'm sorry, I don't hear you. Let me just make sure that your mic is up. You might be muted, Rana. Sorry. If you don't mind starting again. You're good now. Yeah, thank you.
Happy to do it. I think the problem is it's what he's been doing to date. He has been trying to criticize Trudeau, calling him names, saying that the Prime Minister's weak, that he's not standing up to corporate greed and other things, but then he stands up in the House of Commons and votes for him time and time again. It's affected his credibility. And it's interesting that now Pierre Poilievre, of course, has, because of Elmwood-Transcona and other reasons, has gone after Jagmeet Singh. And he's affected not only Trudeau's credibility, but he's affected Jagmeet Singh's credibility. He's been an opposition leader against both these parties and been very successful. But will it amount to anything? A lot of people got really excited to hear the news today. Why? Because a lot of people in this country actually want an election. They want the ability to vote on whether they want a increased child care program. They want the ability to vote on whether they want anti-scab legislation. All of those things you listed were not things the Liberals ran on. And so I think a lot of Canadians thought, wow, this is exciting. We're going to get to go to an election. But you know what I predict? I predict that they broke up, but they're still dating. I think it's going to be very difficult for Jagmeet Singh to explain to people why he dumped the boyfriend, but is still seeing him behind his back. I just behind Canadians' back, and it's going to be there for everyone to see every time he gets up in the House of Commons, and it'll just continue to erode his credibility. It's all about the timing of this by-election, and it's going to be a really tough dance for him.
Rana, I think, brings up, Scott, what will be the bottom line for a lot of Canadians who are watching tonight, who aren't tuned into this stuff to the degree that all of us politically inclined people are. Like, is there going to be an election sooner rather than later? Do you think this changes the possibility of one?
Absolutely. It indisputably does. As somebody who's lived through a minority government, I can tell you it fundamentally changes the dynamic. Now, that doesn't mean that an early election is certain, but it certainly means that the risk, the possibility of an early election has increased enormously, because these things take on a life of their own. We're all talking about the rhetoric that Jagmeet Singh employed today, and it was hard-edged. He didn't just say, all right, you know what, we're going to exit this agreement, and we're now negotiate on a file-by-file basis. If we can secure some gains, then we'll vote with them. If we can't, we won't. No, he denounced them not as a matter of pragmatism. He denounced them as a matter of principle, which makes it difficult for him to then rationalize supporting the next budget or the next confidence vote, or why he doesn't use an opposition day to bring the government to an end after he said they don't deserve another chance. So I thought that was tactically strange on Singh's part, but he's doing it because he knows after this long summer that he is in trouble. He knows that the government and his attachment to this unpopular government is an anchor. But he has a second problem. He's even more unpopular. So yes, the government is at 21%, but he's at 19%. So he also needs time to have people say, oh, well, he's separated himself from the government. Now I'm going to take a second look at him. Then I'm going to improve my attitude toward him. And what? The party's going to rise to 26, 27, 28%? So in the meantime, in order to preserve that pocket of time for that to occur, which I think is extraordinarily unlikely, he's going to have to vote in favor of the government. And he's going to have to find a rationale for why, as Rana says, he's going to be kissing behind the grandstand with Justin Trudeau after he said that he's had no more of them, and he's throwing back the scarf and the school ring. Doesn't make sense.
There's way too many relationship analogies tonight, but they're all definitely resonating. Tom, I wanted to just pick up on what Scott is saying about basically, the period of time Jagmeet Singh has to essentially convince Canadians that he is not so closely aligned with Justin Trudeau. I guess the big question I would have is, given that you've spent 2 years and 5 months essentially showing Canadians the opposite is true, like, do you think, as someone who has led the party, it is still possible to convince Canadians under Jagmeet Singh's leadership that that is the case, that they are not one and the same?
That's been their biggest problem since the day they signed this deal, and I've been talking about it ever since then. And I've always described what it was going to be like on the doorstep in the next election. And that's what's happening in the LaSalle Verdun election, where the NDP has a great candidate and a real chance. They've been getting it on the doorstep every single day from the people that I've talked to. And it goes like this. If Trudeau's so bad, you don't want us to vote for him, why do you keep voting for Trudeau? Why do you keep backing him? And there's no easy answer to that. Now, I agree completely with Scott Reid when he says, the strategic retreat here would have been to say, look, we're just not in this deal anymore. We're not satisfied enough, and we want to walk away from it, but it will be a case-by-case basis. But Singh has left himself very little wiggle room without embarrassing himself and swallowing himself whole by, using the type of overheated rhetoric. I mean, this was the type of boilerplate that Jack Layton and I used to fight against. This type of overstatement, class warfare. Sure, welcome to 2024. I don't think it carries much weight with the average Canadian voter. Is it going to give them a better chance in that by-election? Will it allow Mr. Singh to survive? Because it looks like they will lose Elmwood-Transcona. Could be. By the way, the corollary of that is if Singh and the NDP win here in Montreal, then that by-election is going to be a lot worse than the St. Paul's by-election in Toronto in terms of the reaction. But let's close that parenthesis. Just stick with the essential here. Mr. Singh, I believe, has overplayed his hand. Even saying he's tearing up the agreement. I've talked to a bunch of people today who said, well, it looks like we're heading to an election. Read the statement. The statement says the exact opposite. He's trying to have one thing and its opposite at the same time. We're tearing up this agreement. The Liberals are terrible. But, we'll look at it on a case-by-case basis. You can't say both those things and be credible.
Let me just quickly, to round out the panel, get both Rana and Scott to weigh in on sort of their respective parties and how they're going to respond. Rana, I'll start with the Conservatives. We heard a bit of it from Pierre Poilievre today. It sounds like every chance they get, they're going to try and force the NDP to decide between what everyone has laid out, supporting the government or kind of staying true to the message today. What do you anticipate happens over the next few weeks in that vein?
Well, I mean, I guess we'll see when the next opportunity for a confidence vote is. But of course, the Conservatives will continue to hold the government to account. And at this point, holding both the NDP and the Liberals to account because they're two of the same. And that's been going on for quite some time. And it'll just become even more, I think, important for Pierre Poilievre to do that because it's become apparent to Canadians that this deal is bad for Canada. It's bad for democracy. There are massive, expensive programs that the government is introducing to stay in power. And they say that. And these are programs that people did not vote for. Whether you like them or not, people should have a chance to vote on them. And it's time for an election. And so the Conservatives will continue to push that message. And I think it's an important one.
Scott, what do you think the Liberals are going to do? We heard a bit of it, obviously, in the last interview with Minister Gould and also the Prime Minister today. They're surprised in Jagmeet Singh. He's putting himself ahead of Canadians in their view, and they're just going to keep on keeping on, delivering, they say, for Canadians.
There's not a single extra vote in that message. It's what they've been saying since St. Paul's. We know that it's not working. I mean, if there's one silver lining in this, it's that it disrupts the current circumstance. The Liberals maybe could take advantage of that by saying, all right, let's exhibit change. Let's demonstrate change. Let's take a whirl on doing something different, see if voters respond to that. You do not get the feeling that they're going to do it. I mean, today is like St. Paul's, and I think it's going to be like September 16th when those by-elections come in. This is no longer a government that does things. This is a government that sits back and things happen to it.
All right, lots of things happening in the next few weeks, including those by-elections. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your analysis this evening.